There's only one boss in this place, and that's me. The HNIC.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Indie Comics Dispatch. Tonight we're doing a series, all through September, we're doing a series on representation in comic books in partnership with Head Nerds in Charge. And so we are every Wednesday in September and the first Wednesday night in October, we'll be talking just about different representations of groups of people in mostly mainstream comic books, but a little bit of indie too. And tonight, I'm so excited to have back on the show. It's been a long time since we've seen you here, Brian. Last week. Right. Brian Lambert with Wingless Comics. Brian, welcome back. Refresh everyone about who you are and what your background is.
Thanks, Brett, for having me. It's great to be here at the Dispatch, as always. So Wingless Entertainment and Wingless Comics are my babies, as we call them. Wingless Entertainment, obviously, is the umbrella company that is an animation and multimedia entertainment company. Wingless Comics has spun out of that, which is definitely like, let's say, my firstborn, in that I'm super protective. It's a great thing that we're trying to do, bring some representation, some diversity, some new narratives to comic books, a genre that we all love. And I grew up on. I have some great partners and some great co-creators here with me that are kind of bringing this to the fore. I started as a novel writer in 2016. I published my first novel, and again, that led to this transition to be doing comics and to being here with you.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about your teammates real quick before we keep going. Give them a shout out. I see, I think Malachi has already joined the feed.
Awesome. Malachi is the fuel to my fire. He is the oil to my water. He is honestly, he's the yin to my yang. If I'm up, Malachi is grounded. If Malachi is up, I got to be grounded. And our synergy works really well like that. He's an amazing novel writer. He wrote a novel also in 2016 called Her. He re-released it last year. Because of those kind of relationships and friendships and us just reaching out and talking to each other and our mutual love of comics, I brought him on to Wingless Entertainment and Wingless Comics as my head of development. He's also running the creator-owned series Her, which had its debut 0 issue with our first campaign that just happened in June and July. We've also got, this is a very brand new announcement, which has not hit anywhere, and I saved it for the Dispatch. We just signed a very, very, very talented artist named Orbelin Jaimes. He is an amazing guy. You're going to see some great stuff from him. He's working on a manga called Crimson Overdrive.
Oh, cool.
That will debut in 2021. And obviously, we have multiple projects with a couple other partners coming up. Nightfall is coming up. Nightfall is coming. We've been saying it for months now. October 16th, it will drop. And it will be the event that we all want it to be.
Awesome. I was looking back at my feed today, and I think it was June 10th or June 12th you sent out the email to Kickstarter backers about the crossover, and I posted it immediately on my feed. So I'm hyped, man. That's cool. Manga coming down too. I love that. I just recently read my first manga. Thank you, Plutoons, for recommending. And it was great. So I do want to remind everybody, tonight we're talking about representation of Black men in comic books. That is not to say other weekdays of the month we won't be talking about other representation. In fact, we will be talking about Black woman representation in comic books towards the end of the month with Frankie from Fantastic Frankie. So don't freak out, because all we're talking about is the dudes tonight. We're going to cover everybody. I also want to say, just kind of upfront, here at Indie Comics Dispatch, Black Lives Matter. If you're going to comment on anything about All Lives Matter or any crap like that while we're on the air, or even after we're off the air, I'm going to tell you where to go and then block you. So let's just keep it cool as we move along tonight. So before we jump into comics, do you want to take a moment to explain to others out there what it's like to be a Black man in America right now, or just period? I mean, not even right now. It's on our minds because of right now, but it's all the time, right?
Well, so yes, right. Black people in general are not a monolith. But do we have shared experiences 100%? Can we walk into a room just like every other group can walk into a room and know that you've experienced the exact same things the exact same way 100%? So being a black man in America is being aware of who you are, and sometimes, very unfortunately, being perpetually frustrated with it. Uh, there are things that we're taught as children that, if you do this, then this is what you'll get from it. If you're educated, then this is what will happen. If you have this, this is what will happen. This is what you can accumulate. That doesn't always ring true. And again, while we're highlighting black men, obviously that goes for women, that goes for Latinos. There are so many gradations of how the system itself is driven. But being considered a quote unquote educated man, having 2 degrees, I still have to go in and prove that I'm educated to people. And I mean, classically, because education doesn't mean intelligence. But when we're
Right.
talking about the job market, if the job market is, hey, you need these qualifications, and part of that is education, and I have it, and then I have to go and prove that I have it after that, that's a daunting task. And I use that as a microcosm of what being a black man in America is. You have to constantly prove something. You have to prove that you're not dangerous. You have to prove that you're not a threat. You have to prove that you're intelligent. It's very hard to simply exist. And I think with everything that's going on right now, sometimes, and for all people that are underrepresented, it gets lost in all the noise that
Mm.
people really just want to exist. There is a counter narrative of, oh, people want better, or they want handouts, or they want this, or they want that. Not necessarily. If you don't consider the Homestead Act a handout, then reparations is not a handout. If you don't consider reparations for the internment camps or for the Jews in World War II to be, handouts, then some of these other programs aren't handouts as well. It's, again, the lens that you look at it through. And people in general just want to exist, just want their lives, like you said, you led with, Black Lives Matter. That all that really means is like, hey, we matter, we
Yeah.
exist, we are important too. We shouldn't be treated like animals. And there is, like I said, while we're not a monolith, there is a through line, a cultural through line, that all of us at one time or another have felt that, or have to deal with that. And that, there's a quote, and I'm going to say it wrong, obviously, but like it's like, to be a black man, if you're a black man in America and you're not angry all the time, like you've got something wrong with you, because we're living and existing in not necessarily a society. Because when you start saying society, people take it like personally, like, oh my God,
Right.
I'm not like that. No, but
Right.
if the mechanisms are set up to do that, and you're a cog in a wheel just like everyone else, when you're living in a society that is based in your subjugation, and you have to continually look at that and have people tell you you're crazy when you're seeing it happen, it drives you not necessarily insane, because I believe that people are strong in general, but it is maddening. It can be crushing. It can lead to worse things and worse outcomes.
Yeah, I think you're talking about feeling like a cog in a wheel, realizing that. And the first time I realized that I had been complicit in institutional racism my whole life, just from the sheer fact of who I was born to, where I was born, and the benefits I've gotten from that. I mean, I can't imagine, the shock that came over me then, but I can't imagine being on the opposite side of that at all.
So one thing that I attempt to point out, right? So I grew up in, what's called an affluent town, or, those kinds of things. I went to some pretty nice schools. I went to some pretty bad schools too, but, comparatively, none of those things really matter in terms of what I want to say. But the 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 complicity that you might have felt, right? Or
hmm
that you've had, people sometimes look at that as that makes them evil, right? And
Right.
it's not the case. The case is
hmm
not that. Now, if you are a person, I remember very, very, very vividly, right, being 7 years old, having a crush on a girl, and like elementary school, oh, she's gonna be my girlfriend, that kind of cutesy tootsy stuff, right? And then
hmm
I come to school the next day, and the girl is like, I can't be your girlfriend. My mom said. And I was like, oh, why? Because I didn't understand. And she was like, she said, you can't because you're black.
hmm
And so that was my first instance of being like, oh, black means like worse to people. Like I never, up to that point, I never understood it. Right.
Right.
And so that's again, that's a dude, I could tell you what we were both wearing that day. Like it's a scar that stayed with me.
Mm-hmm.
But again, can I hold the entire society for that? Can I be angry at the entire society for that? No, but it's an
Right.
experience again that most of us, all of us, have gone through, and how we deal with that is different. But again, that doesn't mean that every white person that you meet, every Latino that you meet, every Asian, blah, blah, on and on and on down the line
Right.
is not only buying into it, but feeding that institutionalized racism. The more we notice and the more we see, and the more we're able to peel it back, even as a
Mm-hmm.
male, as you being a male and me being a male, we
Mm-hmm.
have male privilege. There are a lot of guys that want to say we don't. The fact that I can go running at 10 o'clock at night and I don't have to be worried about, my safety from another male necessarily. There are
Right.
other dangers, right? But those are natural, quote unquote, dangers. I don't have to worry about certain things that women worry about. So the more that we pull
Right.
back these layers of what our society has been based on and
Mm-hmm.
realize like the bad and acknowledge the bad and say, hey, it's bad and we don't want to do that anymore, and acknowledge the good and say, hey, we want to make this better, then we should
Mm-hmm.
be fine. But people are
Mm-hmm.
so stuck in the, what about me syndrome, or I didn't
Yeah.
do that, so why
Yep.
am I being punished? You're not being punished. We're
No.
actually evening the field for everyone.
Exactly. Exactly. I love the way you said that all. This is why you're one of my favorite people, Brian. Um,
Thank you. Same
so,
to you, sir.
so we are here to talk about representation in comics, particularly mainstream comics. So when was the first time you remember looking at a comic and thinking, this character looks like me?
So for me, I will say my experience is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if my mom happens to be watching, she'll know this to be true, right? From the time I was like 3 till I was like 5 or 6, like I thought I was Dracula. And so I say that because I grew up in a place, and my mom was so amazing about it, to where my imagination was never stifled. And I think that happens to kids, and it's not the parents' fault. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying sometimes kids' imaginations get stifled because they are led to believe that they can't be anything.
Mm-hmm.
That something does need to look like them in order for them to be it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful in that I didn't, again, until I was older, I never caught that. So at a young age, I didn't really notice or realize the color differences of characters. If I was somebody, or I could have been Luke Skywalker. I didn't have to be Lando, and I didn't have to be the black Luke Skywalker. I just was Luke Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very fortunate in that. So the representation piece for me in terms of comics and black men in comics really hit hard during, everybody loves the 90s era and the Image era stuff and Jim Lee and all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that really hit me hard was Shadowhawk, the reveal for Shadowhawk being a black guy.
Yeah.
That was bigger than Spawn to me at the time, because I don't think anybody was really expecting it. And so it was cool to see this badass, Batman, even darker vigilante, and he was black. It was it
Mm-hmm.
was it was just really cool. And then again, right on the heels of that, I mean, relatively speaking, anyway, right on the heels of that, you have Milestone launch,
Mm-hmm.
and the first time I saw Icon, it was a wrap. Okay, I was like, okay, I got my guy.
Yeah.
Um, and so even though at the time I didn't have the money to buy comics like I do now, those two instances, were just I don't know, pivotal in my comic upbringing, and understanding how important representation and how important, just again, different pictures. We're in a visual
Mm-hmm.
media, and we have
Mm-hmm.
all of these same pictures. That doesn't make sense. So seeing that really made a difference to me.
That's really cool. So kind of your different perspective. This may be I'm not sure. I'm not sure who wrote Shadowhawk, but so there's a difference sometimes between seeing a character, and I love John Jennings' work. I don't know if you follow John Jennings on
Mhm.
Instagram. I love his work. I love his book that he helped edit called Blacker the Ink. And there's a essay in there about this, about being so excited for Luke Cage. And then none of the experiences, none of the vernacular Luke uses rang true. Because ultimately Luke was written by white guys to begin with. And so there's a difference sometimes between seeing a character that looks like you and then a character actually representing the culture you're from. Who was the first character that you remember that was written by a Black person that just it rang true for you?
Ooh, the first one I can remember. As far as comics goes, I honestly don't know. I mean, it's going to be in the Milestone group,
Right.
100%. I can't remember which one resonated with me the most, only because, I mean, to this day, I still love and pore over those comics themselves. I think the difference being the lens that some of these problems are tackled from, like the okay, so in our writers' room, right? In the wing, I'm gonna let you guys behind the curtain now. In the Wingless Comics writers' room, as we edit some of our scripts, we always go over them. Obviously, you know, we'll talk about them and kind of workshop certain things. And I'm a big guy. I'm a big proponent of making sure that things ring true. So there are times, especially in indies, let's say, where we'll try to use vernacular or slang, and it doesn't really, your brain doesn't interpret it the same way.
Right.
Language is to be spoken sometimes and not written. Written language is different than spoken language.
Mm-hmm.
So when attempting to be current or hip, you end up sounding dated. And the thing that I always go back to is, and I love you, Vanessa Williams. Just in case you're watching this, you're amazing, Vanessa Williams.
She is. She's a fan.
Right. You never know, man. You never know. So the first Shaft movie with Samuel L. Jackson. At one point, Vanessa Williams says, like, you know, they're kind of getting into it with the guy, and Vanessa Williams is like, "Step off, peoples." I laugh hysterically every time I hear it because, like, you know, that was written by a white person. Yep. Because we don't talk like that. They were trying to come up with language that was hard and it was biting, and it was like, that's just whew. So for me, it's more glaring when you have someone attempting to, you know, write Black or write Latino or, you know, whatever the particular, you know, genre is. I think one of the big look at Danny Rand in Iron Fist, right? The Netflix series. Mm-hmm. How easy would something have been to say, okay, wait a minute, he's actually Chinese now. His parents were immigrants. His name is Danny Rand because they misunderstood when they were saying Lan. You know what I mean? Like, there were so many easy ways they could have made it and brought in that representation piece and stayed very, very true to the character and true to the culture that it takes from. And I think, again, that's something that would resonate more with people as opposed to the opposite of that, which is like, oh man, when was the one time you felt like something went great for you? And you're like, well, damn, man, if more things would go great, then we would notice when they don't.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat on Instagram wanted to point out, and I think you meant Samuel L. Jackson's first Shaft movie, but that Samuel L. Jackson was not in the first Shaft movie.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. I meant the first movie with him in it. I apologize if I said that wrong.
I got you, man. I got you.
I know Richard Roundtree, guys. Come on, man. I didn't look at my notes for that. I promise.
It's funny you mentioned like the Force and trying to sound hip. This is neither here nor there. It just made me think of me trying to tease my middle schoolers and talk the way they talk, and just how stupid it sounds when Dad tries to talk middle school talk.
It's just not the same.
It's the same.
It's not. It's just not, man. You got to know your era and just go with it. Just stay there.
Right. I'm old. I got to stay there. So Brian Michael Bendis is one person that comes to mind. White writer who has created a fair amount of Black characters. Now, he has Black children, and so I think he creates in honor of his children, but he's white ultimately. How do you feel about white writers writing Black characters?
I don't mind. And I mean, that's the immediate answer, right? The immediate answer should be, I don't mind. Because you're going to have Black writers writing white characters. Now, I do have a problem with white writers trying to write Black, which again, I think is a difference, because then it becomes pejorative as opposed to writing a character that is culturally sound, speaks, talks, thinks the way that a person would, has those same fears, has done a little bit of research. It's amazing how much research um, writers have to do, and actually, to ultimately do a good thing. But then they'll drop that piece in terms of writing a black character or writing a female character. They'll drop, someone will research light speed technology and be able to give it to you, right? But they can't tell you how a black person would say something. That doesn't make sense. That means you didn't do the research, you didn't do the legwork. I think that there is a point of homage that is great. If you take that homage and attempt to use that as your platform, as opposed to the person that you're representing's platform, I think that it can become problematic at that point. You have John Grisham, right? John Grisham is an amazing writer, very, very good. He's written a lot of black characters in his books. I don't know of any. I mean, I'm only really thinking of A Time to Kill right now because we were on Samuel L. Jackson, but I can't think of a character that was necessarily well-rounded. It was, and it wasn't stereotypical. I'm not saying that is the case, but it was very surface level. A lot of characters that sometimes aren't even just aren't the main character are surface level, and that kind of a thing is a disservice, no matter the color of the character. So I believe if you're going to do an homage, if you're going to represent something that is not necessarily your area of expertise, you have to do it well, and that means you have to do research. That means you have to know at least look, dude. Open up a Wikipedia page, if nothing else. Don't write black people after watching Menace to Society. Like, that's not the way to do things, right? Your take on them is going to be wrong. But there are so many people that those are their Bibles. Boys in the Hood is their Bible. Menace to Society is their Bible. And these are just regular people walking down the street. Oh, I've never seen anything but the violence I see on TV. Law and Order, because that's what they've seen. Those again are the problems. Along Came a Spider is a great novel. I love the entire series. But you have a character in there, and I don't know any other black people who call them this, but you have Nana Mama in there, and she's supposed to be like the big mama of whatever. I've never heard a black person call someone Nana Mama, because it's like mama twice, right? Obviously, he's a much better writer than I am. He's made millions of dollars, and I'm not saying he's wrong. Am I saying that I don't like that sort of representation? Am I saying that after Soul Food, the movie came out, all of the white writers that went and wrote a big mama character into all of their works, that I hated that? Yes, it was ridiculous. Again, do a little bit of legwork, do a little bit of research, and see that, again, we want to exist, right? Because we're just as multifaceted as anybody else out there. So while we share these cultural similarities in terms of, whatever stereotypical thing, people want to say, cooking or music or whatever it is, that stereotypical thing that you can apply to anyone. While we share these cultural similarities, we're still completely whole individuals that have these whole lives that are just as amazing and multifaceted as anybody else.
Very good. Very good. If I'm ever looking down, I'm still 100% paying attention to you. I'm also keeping track of Instagram chat. So I'm always paying attention.
No worries. I could definitely go on for hours. So it's all good.
Okay. So in comics, and if you want to elaborate in movies and novels too, you feel free to. What stories are we really missing about Black men?
All of them. Honestly, and then that's 100% all of them. So let's talk about everything. They always say, there's nothing new under the sun. There's no new story told. I 100% agree with that in terms of like boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl again. Like that story has been told a billion times.
Right.
Greatest angel falls, blah, blah, blah. Same thing. Look, that's Darth Vader. That's First Knight. That, you know what I mean? Like you're going to have these stories, right? So the base stories for anyone have been told a billion times. So if we take a historical look at that, at the very least in the last 1,000 years, let's say, that means that those stories have been told millions of times about white men,
Mm-hmm.
and to a smaller extent, white women. So if we extrapolate that, we've got 1,000 years of 1,000,000 stories of black men and women that need to be told. We've got 1,000 years of millions of stories of Latino women and men that need to be told, and Asian men and women that need to be told, and Pacific Islander and everybody else. You know, it's so hard because there are so many diverse cultures, right? And so while obviously as a black man, I'm going to highlight black men, I'm going to speak from my voice and from my lens. I think it would be a disservice to not look and say that there are all these other people that need to be shined too. I don't look at life and I don't look at creativity as a pie. I believe that there is room for everyone, and like we can all have enough. There are what is it now? 7, 8, 9 billion people in the world. Somebody's gonna like it. Somebody's gonna want what you're putting out. So I think every story needs to be told. If people who follow Justice, people who have read issue 1, while we're just scratching the surface of the story, it's a story that hasn't been told this way before. The same for her, the same for every project that I personally put the Wingless stamp on. They're all stories that need to be told. Coming of age stories, romantic comedies, frat comedies, which I mean have kind of gone out of style now, understandably.
Yeah.
You know, all of those different things. You know, yeah, we need it all. We as a humans, as a species, never get tired of creativity. We never get tired of art, which all of this stuff is writing and movies and comics. All of it's art. We never get tired of it. So, you know, what stories need to be told? All of them. We need to get to a place where we can tell people, no, hey, man, I was driving down the street the other day and a cop turned on his lights. And even though it wasn't at me, I didn't know. And for that split second, you know, I had a dry sweat and I was scared for my life. And people need to understand the reasons behind that. And so if comics is the medium that we can tell it, good. If movies are the medium we can tell it, good. Telling and translating stories is all about experience. It's all about the experience of our ancestors, and it's all about the experiences we're going to leave for the future. So like I started with, every single story from a black lens needs to be told. Every single story from a female lens needs to be told.
I'm going to echo Jeffrey Johnson in the chat on YouTube. I'll pop it up here. Jeffrey's one of our new reviewers on Indie Comics Dispatch, so quick shout out to Jeffrey. He's also got a comic book he's working on. But he just says that's powerful. And man, that's exactly what I thought. That just everything, all the stories need to be told because they've been missing for so long. I love your response to that.
Thank you.
And you're so right, and you don't need me to tell you that, but it just resonates with me, you saying that, man.
But so real quick, I think that an addendum to that is that should be the case, right? Because again, I don't need to lose Tony Stark in order to gain Luke Cage.
Right.
I don't, you know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, we're talking about stories, so obviously Falcon takes over for Steve Rogers. Whatever, right? So that's just storytelling, right? But and that's a thing that, again, this is a societal thing and not just the stories that we're talking about. But people feel like they are going to lose if other people get shine. I remember there was a big stink a couple years ago with Star Wars. Oh my God, it's white genocide because there are less white characters. Yeah. And like the opposite of that is like, well, then does it mean it was everybody else genocide because it was only white characters?
Right.
Like, no. Like, you can have your piece where you're displaying everything, and then there can be these other pieces where everything else is displayed as well, and we can all exist together. Like, that is the real basis of it. Is now someone may lose part of the light shined on them. Right. If you are taking up 90% of the market share of visibility and you lose and you only go down to 50% of visibility, that doesn't mean you lose the creativity. That doesn't mean you lose the stories. You just lose the monopoly on being the only one seen. And that's not a bad thing. Because if your product is good, whatever it is, if you are that great, right, and you're not just existing on like, oh, because the market, we've cornered the market, then people are going to buy it. People are going to want to see it. People are going to enjoy your art. It's going to resonate with them.
That's awesome. I want to give a real quick shout out to Bristol Media Group and Dope Girls Comics in the chat right now. They are being very active and commenting on a lot of stuff. And I love all what you guys are producing right now and can't wait to see your books out.
Oh, me too, man. They're great. They have been great and good supporters from the first. So shouts out to them. Big
Yeah.
time.
So we talked about the stories that are missing, and it's a lot. What are the stories that are told that are just kind of racist stereotypes that don't need to be told anymore?
Racist stereotypes.
Right, moving on.
I was actually on another interview a while ago, and I'm a big action movie guy. I've loved them since forever. But in the 80s, we didn't bat an eye when every terrorist was from South America, right?
Mhm.
It was, in Commando, Arnold Schwarzenegger goes and like literally kills like an entire island's worth of people.
Yeah.
And they're all South Americans. And no one really batted an eye. Oh, it's the evil army. We're going to go kill them. Okay. In the 90s, obviously, it was a lot of Arab terrorists. We've continued that into the 2000s. Partially, not because of 9/11, and obviously it's right around the corner, but because of the sentiments that people carried with them and the ignorance that people carried with them in certain respects, then that continued into the 2000s. Uh, um, while both of those eras are happening, and even before that, obviously, you've always had the black man as the criminal,
Mhm.
always the bank robber, always the whatever. And now what I've seen in new movies with this, representation piece is that you'll have a black guy in there, even on, like, let's say something on the police force. Oh man, you got a black guy in there. He's on the police force. And he always happens to be the dirty cop. I just watched Spencer for Hire and it's like, oh man, Bokeem Woodbine is in a movie again. I'm all about it. Oh, he's Spencer's partner too. That's dope. Oh, he betrayed him and sent him to jail because he was the dirty cop. So it's always a lot of backhanded compliments in movies a lot of times. Now you'll get stars, you get Denzel, you'll get, Holly, you'll get some of the obviously the biggest people, and they don't have to take those roles. They're not even offered those roles, nor should they be. And I'm not saying that those roles don't exist for people in general. But when I put out Justice #1, I had someone point out to me, he was like, oh man, the cop was white. And then, this other guy was white. Oh man, and the vampires were white. And I was like, okay, like I didn't see anything wrong with it. And he was like, well, that's a lot of white villains. And I was like, well, one, white people are the majority, so it's going to be more of you guys on the page. First of all, likely, I mean, if we're going there, and then two, why is that a thing? Because if they had been black or some other color, no, he wouldn't have noticed. He wouldn't have said anything. It just would have been a book.
Yeah.
And so our comfort level with those kinds of things needs to change. Our comfort levels with seeing people of color again in a multitude of different ways, it needs to change. It needs to grow. I was talking to my sister earlier today, and we were making some jokes about a series, and Scooby-Doo came up. So Scooby-Doo, the original first 2-3 series, every villain was a white guy, 100%. If I did that tomorrow, put out the same series the same way, and every villain was a white guy, it would be a problem. Someone would be angry about it, but it wouldn't reflect that, hey, it was okay then because white people were all that was represented in that form of media at the time. But now that we're doing diversity, hey, don't make us villains. We've got to be the good guys.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things that have to change. Again, I'm not saying that all white people are villains. I'm not saying that they need to be villains all the time. But if we're gonna spread this this villainy around,
Yeah.
then it's got to be representative of what we see within the country, the demographics that we see in the world. And depending on the time period, it's going to happen.
Yeah, completely agree. There was we'll get to that question later. That's what somebody popped up a question about Wingless. We'll answer Wingless questions at the end.
Okay.
So what are some comic books, mainstream or indie, other than Wingless, people could read to get a better understanding of the Black experience in America?
So mainstream, I'm not really sure, and and I'll be honest with that. I enjoy mainstream comics, not necessarily for all of their commentaries. Don't get me wrong; you'll get some biting ones every so often, but I typically just enjoy mainstream comics. Excuse me. Obviously, you have X-Men. And so that's always going to be a hallmark of that. And oh, I'm gonna go on film right now. I'm gonna say it. No, Malcolm and Martin were not originally the archetypes for Professor X and Magneto. That came way, way later.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you guys know, it was not based in that. Now, that doesn't diminish what the overall point was, but it does change the narrative on those characters. I think after some of those plot points were infused into the narrative, it became more representative of a lot of utilized and underserved peoples. And I think it continues to do that. Hickman's run on it right now is doing a lot of things that 5-6 years ago people I don't think would have been ready for in comics, but I think is also very very necessary. So I mean, I will at least say Hickman's run on X-Men is very good. Um, as far as indies go, there are a ton of indies. A lot of these guys are my buddies and guys that I talk to, and the reason that I believe that it highlights the Black experience is not because they are necessarily shoveling it in your face, but they are, again, just telling the stories and what will be the mythologies and what will be the dreams of future generations, which, like Superman, was an escape
Mm-hmm.
for them. Jiba Anderson's Horseman, obviously TJ Sterling's Alchemist, which is doing amazing things on Kickstarter. Greg Anderson, Elise, and Isnana the Were Spider obviously is good. Concept Moon, they just did a power pack, and they did manga, they did superhero stuff. They've got a
Mm-hmm.
multitude of things. Constant Hustle Comics. I don't want to miss anybody. I'm going to though. I'm sorry, guys. Newton Lilavois, he's got Crescent City Monsters, which is really really great. Everything that you're going to see from 133 Art is great.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Jeffrey is doing some amazing things with Route 3 and no Route 10. Route 10. It's
I'm
Route
not sure.
something.
Yeah.
He's going to be mad at me for not remembering that, but it's Route. I want to say Route 3. That's what's in my mind right now. Robert Jeffrey, all of his works have that lens. Matthew Jones is on Kickstarter right now with Void Beast. That's another manga. There are just so many people. Really, really, like, you can fall down the Black indie comics rabbit hole and not be
Mm-hmm.
disappointed. LaShawn Colvin is going to have Beautiful Soldiers, which is a female book, which I'm interested in. I want to see. I love to see more female creators. Broken Chalice Studios, they're going to have their book towards the end of the year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
There are just so many. It really is between Google, Facebook, Wikipedia. Like, we have the Library of Alexandria again. So seriously, just type in like Black indie comics, and again, you're going to fall down a rabbit hole, but it's going to be one that you really really want to be in. Eminent Comics, Sovereign Comics, again, there are just so much. J1 Studios, there are so many that it's going to be a disservice, and I don't mean to do a disservice to anyone. There are just so many, and so many that I follow. Feral Creative Studios, there are so many, and he's not Black, but he's an amazing guy. He's very representative of what we feel, and again, the opposite end of that too, of how it's taken in on the other end. Just like Brett, Brett is providing a platform, not necessarily to speak, but to reflect some of his feelings. And I think it's cathartic for him to be here and to be hosting and to be open to that. And I think that that's just as important as me as a Black man speaking.
Well, thank you. You're 100% correct again. You mentioned, I'm just going to give a little shout out. Jiba Anderson is going to be on the show on Friday. And so I'm so looking forward to him. And then Milton Davis, the writer who Robert Jeffrey based his book on, the novel on, will be on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to both of them. So you just shouted out a ton of people, and so that's bleeds right into my next question for you, was who are some Black creators that people should be following right now? And the answer to that is all of them.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. All of them.
Because you just shouted out basically my whole follow list on Instagram. So
yeah. No, there's some great stuff. Oh, I forgot J Beyond Comics. You know what I mean? Again, there are just so many guys. With everything that's happening with Diamond and everything that's happening with DC and everything that's happening with Marvel, while those are are tragic for the people who lose their job, for the people who get laid off, just like all the things that are happening right now. It does open up some creativity and some spots for people who previously didn't have a chance to have a chance. It's the same thing that I was just talking about in terms of that market share. Yeah, Marvel, DC, Image, obviously Valiant, Dreamwave, they've had the market cornered. But when you have independent creators finally getting a chance to kind of take away some of that market share, to tell some new stories, to do some things and to twist these narratives, you're going to get some really great products. You're going to see some really great things that previously people didn't have access to. And that's the piece, giving people access to what they previously didn't have access to makes all the difference in the world.
There's a question on Instagram here too. Do you guys agree with the changing existing iconic characters, color, and race in movies? So basically, updating for representation, I think, is the question there.
Yes and no, right? So I just watching Lovecraft Country, which by the way I love.
That's a fantastic series.
They did change some of the characters from male to female. Didn't change the narrative at all, though. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't change what the story is. Now there is there. If we say that pandering doesn't come into the conversation, then we'd be lying. It does, but that's a very fine and nuanced conversation as well. And I think that needs to be handled on a case by case basis. As far as characters, my theory has been this: Captain America. Excuse me, let me say this correctly. Steve Rogers, Captain America, needs to be a white guy. Reason being his origin, what happened, what time he was in, the era, even some of the stuff with Red Skull where they went back and they were like, oh man, because he was supposed to be an Aryan because it was created by a German scientist. Right. So it all makes sense, right? So that makes sense. On the other end, Bruce Wayne Batman, whom I love, Bruce Wayne doesn't need to be a white guy, especially not with his father being a doctor. Historically, if we're talking about it and we're talking about the time, it actually would seem to reason that he could be a black man. And then Bruce could be a black child, and none of his story, none of his origin, quote unquote, needs to be white. It doesn't need to be. Bruce could be a Latino. Bruce could be anything, because none of it leads to a certain societal norm at the time. Now let's go and say Superman. Again, Clark Kent Superman. Clark Kent Superman has to be white, because he grew up in Smallville. If you've got a black dude that can outrun everybody, has laser eyes, flying up, they're going to find out who he is real quick. There's not going to be a mystery. So his origin leads to that being a necessity. And I think those things need to be examined before changes are made. I don't think changes need to be made just to say, oh man, we put a black person in there and we made this new character black. Like, okay, cool. But did it? Okay, so there's a difference. You cast Zoe Saldana as Gamora. Gamora is green. So while it is an Afro-Latino getting the role, so on the representation piece in terms of society, that's great. But if we try to say like, oh man, that's a black character now, like, nope, she's still green, bro. She's still an alien. So if there is rhyme or reason for it, then it makes sense. If you're doing it just for brownie points to say, hey, look what we gave you guys. We gave you a black person. That is pandering, and that is to me the worst form of I don't know. It's not submission necessarily, but it sets a horrible precedent, because it's stopping at Aunt Jemima. And what I mean by that is like, okay, we're going to take Aunt Jemima off the box. Okay, cool, good, thank you. We didn't ask for that, but thank you very much. But if that is the end of the struggle, if taking Aunt Jemima off the box is like, well, hey, now you guys are even, we don't need to change any laws or do anything, right? Yeah, then no, it doesn't match. And no, that's not okay. And if that representation is like that, then no, I don't want it. No, don't give me a shiny so that I forget about the fire behind me.
That's great. Trying to keep up with some of the conversation happening on Instagram. E4 Comics says, I'd rather we create new creations instead of taking old ones over. Bristol Media says those characters grew with us and have emotional connection. I don't just want color. I want culture and substance.
So can I weigh in on that one real quick? Because
yeah,
I
of course.
100%. This is where maybe we kind of differ, possibly, because like I said, when I brought up Iron Fist earlier, that's one that for me that sticks in my craw, right? Obviously he was a white guy. you easily could have gotten Asian representation in there. And I realized that I grew up with Iron Fist and I like Iron Fist, but that character is so culturally appropriated that to, change them or what should be changed them back,
Right.
I don't think would impact anything. There are some big iconic characters that I don't think need to be changed or should be changed. Or again, if it doesn't, I would hate that if I wrote my novel and in 50 years somebody produced it and the novel is like it's called, Ascension, and it's the main characters are the Black Knights, and then all of a sudden it's like 18 white dudes. I'm gonna be mad, right?
Right.
Because you wrote your character a certain way. So I do think that there are certain characters that are attached to their color and culture. I do think that there are others that can be unattached from that culture and color. And again, the big example that I use really is Iron Fist, because that character is so culturally appropriated.
I love it. I love all the discussion that's happening in everywhere. Both on Instagram, our conversation here, the comments coming in on YouTube. Lots of people are weighing in, and that's great. The more we talk about it, the less awkward it is when we do talk about it. And so don't let the conversations die, guys. If you're out there, don't let it stop here. Continue that conversation everywhere you go. Okay, that's just kind of rehashing. All right, so Brian, I got a Wingless Comics question for you. Let's pop it up on the screen real quick. George says, big fan of all three of the Wingverse characters. I would like to know more about Caliburn. What powers does he have?
Ooh, George, man, my boy George, man, why would you do that to me, George? So Caliburn is the rogue of the Wingless universe, and there are parts of him that will stay an enigma, but I will say that he is empowered by the sword of his namesake. So Caliburn is an earlier name template for Excalibur. So divine what you will from that in terms of story.
Nice.
His other arm is not shown, and there is a reason. There is a reason his other arm is covered. It's going to be really cool. I won't tell you guys. But again, if you go down your Wikipedia rabbit hole and some of the Arthurian legend, it's going to lead you to some answers. Again, I don't want to tell you guys everything because it's a major part of who he is and some really cool things I want to give you. He's an Olympic level athlete. He's a badass, for lack of better words, man. And business is good.
I do love that you recently, G.I. Joe did an homage cover to Wingless. They copied your cover. I don't know if everybody's seen that or not, but
oh man, I don't know how. I mean, okay, so it's presumptuous of me as an indie creator to be like, man, you guys copied. But of course, that was my immediate thought.
And Bitterroot copied you too. I mean, Bitterroot had a variant cover that, man. I mean, you were the first one to have a dude sitting on a motorcycle, I'm sure. So that's
okay. I was like, look, like I said, when I did it, it was a year ago. When I got it commissioned and I put it up and it's an homage cover, right? So I can only take so much credit for it. Obviously, Prince was fundamental in my upbringing, obviously. So there's that part of it. The other part of it was, as a human being with an ego and everything else, I definitely was like, oh man, nobody was thinking about doing this until I did it. So I had to take you've got to take the good in all things, right? So the good in all things is, you can look at it one of two ways. I can look at it and say, oh man, these guys copied me. After I did it, then they did it because they thought it was cool. Or I can say they never saw it, they never knew, but I'm thinking along the same lines as some pretty damn great creators, some pretty damn great artists, some pretty, successful people. And if that's the case, then I'm on to something, and I just got to keep pushing and keep going through and making it happen, which is after some gelato to calm my nerves, then yeah, that's what I did. You really step back and take the personal ego out of it and say, hey man, they may never have seen it, but it means you're right on the pulse of what the industry wants. Both
It does,
both
yeah.
both the indie industry, you know what I mean? Because I've gotten, fan outpouring, and the mainstream industry because that's what they want to look like. So I just, take it in stride and try to remember that part is what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think, let me see. It was Dope Girls Comics says, let's make some room for the new guys, please, meaning new characters, I think, and new indie creators out there. And I agree. The indie community is so awesome and just so supportive. Brian, what's been your experience working with other creators, black and white, within the indie community?
It's been really, largely great. I will say, originally, and I bring him up all the time because he was really one of the first people I linked up with in the indie industry, is Greg Anderson Elise.
He is
He
just a
was,
genuinely nice guy, isn't he?
yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
him.
No, so again, man, I saw Isnana on, I don't even remember what it was. I saw it on something random, and me and him just struck up a conversation. We've become very, very good friends since that. So not just a business relationship, or I just know him because of indie. We're actually friends. Um, the first indie comic I ever picked up was Tuskegee Airs. Well, in the let's say the new era, was Tuskegee Airs. And Marcos Williams and Greg Burnham are great guys. They've been really, really amazing. 133 Art does my printing. Again, amazing group of guys. Keithan Jones, who does Power Nights. See, I forgot Keithan earlier, man.
Yeah.
Power Nights by Keithan Jones. Again, I went to 2 years ago now, or a year ago now. A year ago now, I went to my first Black comic convention, and that was Black Comics Day, hosted in San Diego by Keithan Jones and that group. And within a year, I was tabling with them, and I was among friends and among peers. So it really is that simple. It really is that easy. Again, it's not for indie creators. If nothing else, it's not a pie. It really, for us, it's not.
Right.
Get out there. As long as your material is good, I don't want to say don't overestimate your material. Make sure that it's as good as you believe it to be. Take it to the finest point you can get it. Now, don't obsess over it or do anything crazy, but make sure that the grammar is right. Make sure that don't skimp on editing. Everybody skimps on editing. Do not skimp on editing.
They do.
Okay, that's the biggest mistake. And I know it's an additional bit of money, and it sucks. I've done it again with novels, and I've done it with comics. Do not skimp on editing. Editing is so important. Get a good editor that you trust. Oh shit, Dorfeast Jean, damn it, Nia Kaler, and fucking Spirit's Destiny. Again, I'm going to continue to do this because I'm going to keep forgetting people, and I'm trying not to. But there are just so many good comics, and there are so many people that are willing to work with others, willing to mentor others. If you're willing to put in the work, don't just cold call somebody. Don't just hit them up. Oh, hey man, I'm doing comics. You should help me out. Well, I'm doing comics too. I got to help me out first. But really be a part of the community. Really be putting into the community. And when you do that, then the community gives back. And it's been a very, very, very good experience for me, and for Wingless, and for the other people that I've mentored. Like I said, I mentioned Farrow Creative Studios, Jason Farrow, really, really good guy. The Convictor is live on Kickstarter right now.
Yep.
Really, really good guy. We talk all the time. Again, it's some of those relationships that span the bridge of race, that span the bridge of them being on the East Coast and me being on the West Coast. One of the guys I work with really closely right now, Concept Moon Studios, Brandon Diddley, he's in Saudi Arabia, but we talk, every day, every 2 days. He's like a brother to me. So again, this community, you can find, I don't want to say what you've been missing, but you can find what sometimes you didn't know was there the entire time. And this community is very, very rife for that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Brian, as we're almost out of time on our Instagram feed, IGTV limits us to 1 hour. Mark Zuckerberg changed that.
Right. Haters.
Brian, how can people find and support your projects?
We're on Wingless_comics on Instagram, Wingless ENT on Twitter. Facebook is Wingless Comics. I believe me and Facebook are having some issues right now. We had like a little bit of a breakup, I believe. But hopefully we'll get back together. Hopefully she'll accept me again. Online, we're www.winglessent.com. All of our social is there. We are fairly out and about. You can follow us again. Oh, even on Kickstarter, you can follow us. I do some pretty frequent updates. Wingless Comics, no, Wingless Entertainment on Kickstarter. Again, we try to be out and as visible and as accessible as possible.
Awesome.
So we'll always be there. Also, to my Kickstarter backers, the fall and the collector's edition went out yesterday. You guys better know I love you, because all of those signatures, man, I was not ready for that. But yeah, so those 2 packages should be out into you guys. Give it maybe 7 calendar days, because we know our postal woes right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. If you haven't been reading Wingless Comics, you should be. They are amazing. You can get Justice issue 0 still for free right off the website. That's a great preview issue, and Justice 1 is shipping now, like he said. Great books. Can't wait. If you backed on Kickstarter, there's all sorts of great additions at the end of the issue 1 of Justice that go above and beyond the story. That just made my day when I read it. And so, guys, go support Brian. Brian, thank you so much for being here tonight. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and we'll have you back on soon, man.
Thank you very much again for providing the platform. And I just want to, I know we're almost out of time, but I really want to say that this gap can't be bridged without both sides. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you're on the other side, but if people who are like you, if people who look like you, like we talk about representation for us in arts and media and all these other things, but if people who look like you aren't representing and showing that representation to other people who look like you, who aren't doing it politically, who aren't doing it actively, who aren't doing it in society, then the same way that we can't believe that that dream is going to happen for us because we don't see that representation, they're going to feel the same way. They're not going to know it because they haven't had to live that and live with that form of society, but it's there. So what you do, what people like you do, what other comic creators that are shining these lights do is important. It's important beyond words. It's important beyond measure. And the humility that you do it with, to where it's not a platform for you to spout opinions at me and then tell me what's right, again, is another piece that can't be quantified. That is, you are the writer that we were talking about. You are the writer that writes a Black character from a place of knowledge and a place of intelligence and a place of love and research and homage, as opposed to a caricature. You embody some of the things that you talk about within comics and the questions that you want. And again, that can't be quantified. And if no one has told you before, I want to be here live so the whole world can hear it. I did not rehearse this. I haven't talked to Malachi about it. We didn't talk about this off camera. This is my actual personal true feeling. And I want you to know that what you do for the indie comics community, for the Black community, and how you live your life is appreciated.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. That means a whole hell of a lot, especially coming from you. Thank you again for being here. We're going to wrap it for tonight, guys, so that I can go cry. And so, but every Wednesday and the first Wednesday in October, we're going to be talking representation in comics. And so we're going to try to cover as much as we can. No series could ever cover everything. And so I hate that there will be certain populations left out, but hey, it just means that we can call me out on it, and we'll get them in the next series. Brian, thank you again. Wingless Comics, everybody go follow. If you haven't already, download issue 0, read that, and support Brian when his next Kickstarter begins. Good night, everybody.